ahead and move forward with the presentation. And hopefully you'll see my slides. We want today's conversation to be kind of free flowing and educational and informative. So if you want to come off mute, if you want to join me up here and turn on your camera so I can see your beautiful Black and brown faces, that would be so dope. But I really want us to talk about sexuality as a whole. And I have a model that I use to teach about sex, and it's very helpful to also learn about sex too. So it's not only good for the educators, it's good for our students in a way for them to learn. And we're going to dive in, and then you can use the Q&A for submitting questions. You can also submit those anonymously, and you can use the chat because I will keep that up as we move forward. So I know that when we're talking about this session, the first thing that comes to your mind and the word that people think about all the time when we're talking about even being positive about our bodies, how we use our bodies, engaging, and how we feel about our bodies is sex. So here's where I need you to be engaged as possible. So when you see the word sexuality or the three letters, SEX, type in the chat what comes to mind for you. So what things do you think about when you see the word SEX? And it's, as you're doing that in the chat, it's important to recognize that those three letters are only a part of our sexuality. But I'd love to hear what comes to your mind, first thing that comes to your mind when you see the word SEX. Now, I teach this class at a university here in North Carolina called Human Sexuality. And I ask my students all the time, like, what comes to mind? And so I'm seeing in the chat that liberation, yes, comes to mind. Intimacy comes to mind. And I know when people think about intimacy, they think about not only, or they primarily think about physical intimacy, but intimacy evolves all around us, and I can't wait to dive into that. So y'all got me feeling real good about what we're going to be talking about. So keep jotting in the chat what comes up. I know for my students, sometimes what comes up for them are body parts and how they work. Feelings and emotions come up at times. They talk about their brains and their bodies. They talk about expectations. They said when they hear or see the word SEX, those are the things that come up for them as well. So here's what I want to present to you today. So when I think about sexuality, I don't just think about certain areas. I kind of think about all of the things that present to our sexuality. And so this model is actually called, and I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm going to be using the chat too, so y'all can use it as well. But this model is called the Circles of Sexuality. And it is a model that was created by Dr. Dennis Daly and Pamela Wilson. And what I need y'all to know about Pamela Wilson is an African-American, a Black woman. So it is important to recognize that this model has influence of a Black woman, of a sister, and explaining our sexuality. Now, what you also see are large circles and small circles. So the model itself has includes the 5 larger circles. But what we know as human beings and just living in our spaces is that our culture, our values, and our beliefs are going to impact these 5 circles. And so for each of us, the way we live out these circles, the way we understand these circles, and the way we navigate our lives in respect to these circles is going to be different because of our own personal values, our own beliefs, and our culture. And even though some of us may even share aspects of similar culture, it's still going to be different. So the 5 circles, as you can see, consist of sexual identity, sexualization, sensuality, intimacy, which is what you all put in the chat, and sexual health and reproduction. So I'm going to take us through each of these circles. Hopefully you can give some examples of what you think they might mean, and then we're going to dive into that. And then finally, we're going to talk about a term called sex positivity and what that means, because being here today and after you leave here today, I hope that you will take on a sex positive approach to your own sexuality. I know some of you may be parents, aunties, or caregivers for young Black women, but want you to have a sex positive approach as well. So let's dive in. The first circle. I made this circle first. Now, these don't go in any order, it's just 5 circles. But I felt it was important to start with sensuality. So when you think about sensuality, if you were to use the chat, what things will you put in there? So when we talk about sensuality, it's how we feel about our own body and how we feel about other people's bodies, especially if the bodies of our sexual partners or people we might be attracted to. Sensuality also allows us to think about how we feel in our bodies and what they can and cannot do. Sensuality also allows us to enjoy the pleasure that our bodies can give us and for others. And this part of our sexuality can impact different behaviors in different ways. So what comes to your mind when you think about sensuality? Let's see if I get anything in the chat, would be great. But I also want to acknowledge this. So with sensuality, think about the first part of this word, sense, your 5 senses. So when you think about your 5 senses, you think about touch, taste, hearing, seeing, smelling. I had a moment where I was trying to type them and say them at the same time. So we have these 5 senses, and so sensuality is a critical component. Now I want you to look around your spaces, and if you have your little purse or bag or something beside you or whatever, think about something you could touch right now or grab right now, and as it relates to sensuality. So I'm looking at my desk, and 2 things that stand out for me. Listen, you gotta have your lip gloss. I got that Rihanna Fenty. This relates to my sensuality for me because I love the way it feels. So I think about my senses. If you never used this lip balm or lip gloss by Rihanna, it smells good, it feels good going on. That's part of my sensuality. When I look at myself, I'm like, yes, my lip gloss is popping. Color looks good on me. So sensuality, think about these 5 senses, at least 4 of them or 3 of them when I'm using my lip gloss. I also have this cloth, like I wear glasses, but this cloth is so soft. And sometimes I just touch it. So thinking about that, it has nothing to do with anybody else. It's about my own experience, my own pleasure. So if you think about the foods that you like to eat or loved ones that you come by, even if it's your partner, what they smell like, and thinking about those memories around that. Sensuality is so powerful, we don't even talk about it. Sensuality also includes something called skin hunger, and that's our desire to touch and be touched. Oftentimes, another thing that I have at my desk, y'all, I have a lot of stuff on my desk. I have this lotion, and sometimes I'm just sitting here, I realize that my hands are dry, but also this smells really good. And so not only am I thinking about what skin hunger can be about, the desire to be touched, but it's also even touching yourself, thinking about the positive affirmations you can say to yourself when you're lotioning your body after you've had a shower or bath and you're getting ready for the day. So sensuality has even more to do with your own self than it actually does with somebody else. Another aspect of sensuality is, again, pleasure, things that make us feel good. So listening, remember earlier, if you were here, that song Lullaby was on. That's one of my favorite songs to listen to because it's like giving me permission, I feel like, to not have to save the world as a Black woman. And it just feels really good. And the person who shared it with me, when I first heard it, I literally started crying because that's how emotional it made me, and it just brought me so much joy. And so that was the pleasure of listening to music or listening to positive things that people can say or that I can say to myself. It also includes our body image. So how we feel about our bodies, why we wear what we wear, how we show up. And we don't show up for others. When we put on our clothes and our lip gloss and all that, we're doing that for ourselves. So sensuality is critical as it relates to ourselves. So it's your five senses, is the how you feel about yourself being attractive, your body image, for how you others might be attracted. All of those things include your sensuality. So I see in the chat, it's like confidence is what seems to come to mind. Yes, when you think about sensuality, because you're like, I feel good, I look good, I'm gonna do a great job. So sensuality includes your physical and your mental. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the next one. Oh, but before I go, I was just thinking about, when you talk about sensuality, how does our beliefs, values, and culture impact that? We use the term Black girl magic, even the term, the title of this conference is so amazing. And that's also being able to embrace our skin, who we are, parts of our culture. And we know that society can say the total opposite of what we believe and know is true. So that's another part of like how beliefs, values, and cultures impact this part of our sexuality, entitled sensuality. Now I'm going to go back or move forward and talk a little bit about sexual identity. So for sexual identity, this is basically how we define ourselves, how we show up in the world, how others perceive us. So you might hear us talk about masculinity or femininity. And so it's your sense of being male and female. Now I want to let y'all know, gender, although our biological sex is determined by chromosomes and body parts when we're born, gender identity itself is really up here, and it's really a social construct. Because what does it really mean to be feminine? What does it mean to be masculine? So like I grew up in a space where sometimes some of the women that I knew were not allowed to wear pants because they felt like that was a part of. So now we see how culture, beliefs, and values played a part in their lives, but they weren't allowed to wear pants because that was seen as more masculine. And some of them, as they grew up, they embraced that and held on to those values, that belief, and that part of their culture. Others were like, you know what, I like to wear pants, and I don't want to do XYZ. So our sexual identity is about how we show up, how we want to feel feminine, and how we can tap into masculinity and what that even means. Even if you think about when we have babies and even these gender reveal parties, people are set. Back in the day, you didn't know, you just knew you were having a baby. So you couldn't deck out the crib or like the nursery or buy all this blue stuff and pink stuff. So sexual identity is related to the femaleness and the maleness, but it also includes how we show up in that. So it's wondering, so it's saying, even am I Black enough? There's so many things I don't know about my own hair, and I'm just figuring out. And the gender is just a consistent role that we play. Absolutely. And we have to navigate that for ourselves. I think your name is Akila. I hope that's your name. You have to navigate that for ourselves about like what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, gender roles. There's expectations. So the expectation in society, sadly, still remains today with gender roles, is that who should be a teacher? Chat, if you can put that in the chat. Ideally, what gender or what sex should be a teacher? The expectation is that females or women are teachers. And who should be a nurse? The expectation is that women or females should be a nurse. But we know that males and men can be that. And we also know that women, females, can be doctors, engineers, firefighters, police officers, like all these things. And so our sexual identity can't be controlled by the values and beliefs outside of us, and it can't dictate what we do. What I love, you see that picture of Janelle Monáe, someone like her, or even Prince. Some people would say Michael Jackson. They're people who kind of show up and they're both masculine and feminine. And depending on what you're most attracted to or appreciate most is kind of what you would see. So if I look at this picture, I love the what I feel perceived as the masculine stance and look that she's given, but I love that red lipstick, which also could be the feminine side of Janelle. So we don't know exactly how she wants to show up and what, but we love the fact, or at least I love the fact, that she can mix it up and you don't have to be confined by what society tells you to do, and you grow into that. What we have to be careful of, people get to make their own decisions, so we shouldn't dictate, well, women should do this and men should only do that. We have to be able to figure that out for ourselves as what we want to do, and not because of our gender identity or our sexual identity. Our sexual identity also includes, who are we attracted to? So the odd thing about it, and I find this even challenging as I teach this, is that there are more than two gender identities. And some people don't even subscribe to what we call the binary, which is the two, male and female. Some people are gender non-conforming, they don't rock with either. And then there's some people who kind of float, or what we call gender fluidity, like maybe Janelle might say she is. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there as an example, but can float between the masculinity and femininity. And so with sexual orientation or attraction, it's kind of like, it almost feels like you have to be with some of the orientation identities, that you have to conform to the binary. So if you're a female who likes another female, people would say that you were a lesbian. But if you don't rock with the identity of being female or woman, it kind of won't put you in that box. And so there are other I'm using labels, but there are other terms that could define who you are and who you're attracted to. The key is you get to define that. We can't tell you who you are. And when you tell us who you are, guess what, y'all? We have to believe it. We have to accept the identity that we have. We don't get to put that or make assumptions by the way someone dresses. I know in my family, there's certain people who my mom and my aunties feel like, oh, well, they dress too masculine. So they're making assumptions about who they're attracted to, when they just don't want to wear the clothing that they think they should wear, or the aunties think they should wear. And the same would be true for some of my male or boy cousins, the same thing. So sexual identity includes how we want to feel related to our masculinity, femininity, or not, the gender roles and expectations that go with that, our biological sex, so what we were given at birth based on our body parts and our biological makeup, our chromosomes, and then how we identify for ourselves. So that's sexual identity, and we can see how culture, values, and beliefs can really impact that. So I want to make sure I have enough time to cover all the circles. So then the next circle, okay, I know I said sensuality is one of my favorite circle, but like close and second or hand in hand would be intimacy. I feel like we don't learn enough about sensuality and intimacy. So someone put that in the chat, is like, what comes up in intimacy? So, okay, I see some folks here. Please, please, please use the chat and tell me, put an example of what you think an intimate behavior or act, like something you could do to be intimate with yourself or with someone else, what that could be in the chat. Drop that in the chat. Come on, y'all. I need some engagement here. I need to know y'all are with me. I'm not talking to myself. So what is a act, something you can do or for yourself or with somebody that is intimate? So drop those in the chat. Let me check. All right. Yeah, here we go. Rubbing lotion on yourself is not only intimate, but it also taps in. You see how they overlap into sensuality. So that's some time with yourself, but you're also stimulating your senses. Just sitting and talking. Listen, if you got some really good girlfriends or even your partner, being able to sit down and talk and share and actively listen and be present. This is what I love about intimacy. It's the presence that matters. It's being there. And sometimes being there means like physically there, or sometimes it could just be virtually. Like right now, that's why I need y'all in the chat. Like I need to know y'all are here. Connect with me. That's what intimacy is about. It could be holding hands, kissing, laying on someone. Someone said even yoni steams, because that's something you're doing for yourself. So if that's what you want to do to connect with yourself, totally. Having a conversation. Oh, listen, Akila is a scholar up in here because she said reciprocation of energy, like sharing space with someone. And that is what it is. It's so much more than just, uh, you know, uh, expecting somebody to be there with you, but they need to, because have you ever been in a space where you're like with people or someone and you still don't feel connected, like nobody's really talking? You could, like nowadays, you could just sit with someone, you're sitting there, but you're like on your phone. Like even if I do this now, and if y'all are looking at me on screen, you can probably feel, I know it changes the energy that I have just being here, and it could probably shifted your energy too. So intimacy is being comfortable, reciprocating, and getting that energy and being present with people. But y'all, it also means, just like some of the other ones said earlier, being comfortable by yourself. You need to be comfortable by yourself. Reading together, being vulnerable, yes. Taking a shower, bathing someone, intentional eating, like being mindful about the meals that you even share. Because I don't eat meals with everybody, let me tell you, because that's part of my intimacy. Because if I don't trust you or like you yet, I'm getting to know you. Sharing a meal to me is very intimate because we're connecting in that way. And I love that Sheridan said, just gazing into someone's eyes in silence and being present. So intimacy requires you to be emotionally available and vulnerable. Sometimes you can meet people and all of a sudden it's like this instant connection and you feel the need to like share and give, and some other people you kind of might feel guarded. That's part of your intimacy. That's growing together. I don't know if you want to put in the chat, how many of you have ever heard or watched the show Catfish? Anybody know the show Catfish? So a lot of times in my teaching in class, I talk about Catfish. So for those of you who don't know, Catfish is a show where it was based on an individual who met someone online and they actually weren't true to who they were, and they got really close and connected, and then heartbreak happened because that person wasn't really who they said they were. And some people are like, I can't believe this happened. But because of our need to connect through intimacy, Catfish can happen easily. And I'm old school, and there's an episode of Good Times. If y'all know Good Times, it's a really good show from back in the day. And there's a brother and sister. Well, there's two brothers and a sister, Thelma, JJ, and Michael. Michael's the youngest. JJ by Jimmy Walker is like the older brother. And he got a CB radio. And Michael, the young brother, started playing on the CB radio and was talking to Fun Girl. That was her name on the CB. I don't know why I remember that. But Michael was pretending to be JJ, and Fun Girl was saying she was great at dancing, maybe in roller skating. And Fun Girl actually, unfortunately, well, I don't say unfortunately, she actually was confined to a wheelchair. But that to me was like the best example of like why we catfish, because Michael wanted to connect, Fun Girl wanted to connect, but they weren't being true and honest. And so intimacy is impeded or can't grow. You can't grow intimate with another person because if you're not being honest, if you're not being true, if trust is not being built between individuals or groups, you can never be intimate. Even with large groups, like you might have a group of good friends and you look at it, let's say there are 5 friends, there might be 2 friends who are really close and maybe 2 other friends who are close, and then a threesome going on because they're able to connect in different ways than all 5 of them can, or different ones can. So yes, Kay says she remembers that episode. That's like the first documentation in my mind of being catfish, and why it can happen is because once we start letting people in, we connect with them. And so when we think about our culture and values, I know from my family, certain things you're not supposed to talk about outside of the home, and it takes time to build trust. And so when you think about if trust is something you value, it's going to take time for you to become intimate with others. But it's reciprocal, just like I forget someone just said in the chat. So thank y'all for letting me know y'all are out there with me and following me in the chat. So with intimacy, I think this is something we have to continue talking about no matter how old we are. We need to start young because this is the way we build lasting and strong relationships, whether they're intimate relationships or not. when I say intimate, meaning romantic, I probably should say, because all of them could be intimate. Think about this: if you were breast or chest fed by your parents, then guess what? That was an intimate moment. When you're with someone like even a baby, that is an intimate moment. That is a part of their sexual growth and development when they're being chest fed. So it's really important that we have conversations around intimacy. So I'm going to move on to the next circle. So this circle, I feel like we talk about a lot. And we talk about it, but we don't talk about it. So give me in the chat if you've ever been in a family situation where it's like, well, we are not going to talk about that, or don't let that leave the house. It's kind of related to intimacy, but it speaks a lot to sexualization. And sexualization is the part of our sexuality that is seen negative because it has a lot of different negative connotations, but it also can be positive. So when we think about the negative, we're thinking about how people can use your sexuality to influence others. Sometimes it can be harmless, and sometimes it can be really cruel or even criminal. So that includes things like flirting. Ideally, flirting can be harmless, but if someone tells you to stop flirting or they don't reciprocate back, then that could soon turn into sexual harassment. So you got to be careful. But if you have consent or you have a relationship with somebody, flirting can happen even for people who've been together for years, or if it's harmless, or people have used their sexual power. I can think about people smiling or being real nice and kind to someone, or trying to get something, a discount or something like that. That's still part of sexualization. Sometimes, like I said, it can be harmless, but oftentimes it also includes sexual abuse, rape, incest. And I don't want us to use the chat in any way, but I know many of us have experienced this, or we know people who have experienced the trauma of sexual abuse and or rape, and it has a definite impact on all our circles. If we go back to that first diagram with all the circles together, if you've experienced sexual abuse or assault, it could impact your ability to be intimate with others. It could impact your sensuality, like certain smells or the way somebody touches you might not feel good, and you have to work through that for yourselves. And this is why when we're talking with I want to say younger girls or women, but I think all women, we have to talk about sexualization. We have to share our stories. We have to be able to encourage one another and be careful of what we say to one another, because it's sexualization. Sometimes we blame each other for something that happened out of our control. Just because you wore something or you went somewhere doesn't give anybody the right to force you into sex or abuse you in that way. And consent is critical when it comes to sexualization. And so we have to remember consent is the cornerstone in any relationship. Even if you've been married for years, sometimes it can be implied, but if someone says no, I know you can put this in the chat. No means no. And you probably have heard this time and time again, that no means no, and consent can be withdrawn at any time. So maybe today I wanted to hold hands or kiss, but tomorrow I might not feel like it. And just because I did it yesterday doesn't mean that I'm going to continue doing it, and it doesn't obligate me to do it either. So just remember that in terms of sexualization, that we can use our sexuality over people in a very harmful way, and our power over people in a very harmful way. And we want to do it in a, I don't want to say we want to do it in a positive way, but like in a sense of harmless, possible flirting. But if someone says no or doesn't respond positively to you flirting, that means you need to stop, because they need to stop, you need to stop, whoever needs to stop, because now we're looking at sexual harassment. So hoping y'all are coming up with some questions to ask as I go through this, because I want to leave time for questions. All right, so now this is probably the circle where we get all the information bombarded on TV commercials, PSAs, in school, at home, because sexual health and reproduction is primarily focused on what we need to do to protect our bodies, the information that we need to know about our body parts, to it is also connected in my mind to sensuality, because knowing your body parts means that you can experience pleasure with those body parts should you engage with someone or even by yourself, right? And as you grow, you'll know your body. So sexuality or sexual health and reproduction is really focused on understanding the function of your body and what you want your body to do or what your body can do. So for many of us, I probably put too many photos up here, but it's about understanding, let's say, pregnancy. So how someone might get pregnant, how to prevent pregnancy, even if if you're going to give birth, how you want to give birth, how you want to conceive, because there's different ways that you can conceive. There's different ways you can prevent pregnancy or used for contraception. We all have choices. So again, you can see values, beliefs, and culture are going to play a part in that. Some people will say they don't want to take birth control because part of their culture and their belief is that sex is only for procreation. If that's your belief, that's fine, but that is not the only reason why people have sex. People have sex for recreation, overall just pleasure. So people can do what they want to do that's right for them. We just can't place judgment on that, which we're going to talk about on the next few slides around sex positivity. But sexual health and reproduction also means our choice around if we're going to have a child or not have a child. It's really about also getting factual information. Sometimes in school, we only get a little bit of information about our bodies and how they work, because it's always through a prevention lens, and it kind of can scare you sometimes because what they show you, these pictures, and usually if someone has an infection or STI, it doesn't even look like those pictures. So then it confuses us because you wonder how that thing even happened. I was just talking to my niece about an exam that she had to have and what that was going to be like, and so there was things that she didn't get in school that she was able to get from me to talk to learn about through talking to me. And so I encourage you, no matter who you are, to talk to people who are older than you, and as you get new information, talk to people who are younger, because it's no worse thing than to be navigating this space and not having all the information, factual information about our bodies and how they work. And then this is also includes sexual behavior besides intercourse. Like there's other things that you can do to obtain pleasure. That's why understanding and knowing those body parts are also important. So you can not only care for them, but you can use them for pleasure and understand how they're supposed to work. And if something is in your world not working properly, and you can find out and have conversations with your doctor. This is also or medical provider, a space where you can learn the proper terms. Like it's nothing wrong with using slang terms, but you also want to know what the term is so you can know exactly how it functions. And so here is a spoiler alert in that, let me see, I might have it right here. I do, y'all. So a lot of times with this, we talk about the vagina. So the vagina is in, out, all of that. And the vagina is not. So here you see, this is called the vulva. So this is the outside. Remember that. The vulva, type that in the chat. Type vulva. I'm going to type it for you. And everybody else type it. That means you're saying it out loud. The vulva is the outside. The vagina, so I'm sticking my hand in here. That's your inside. So like if you get a wax or something, they're not waxing your vagina. First of all, there's no hair in there for most people. And that's going to hurt because the vagina is like the inside of your mouth, even though here it's like red, just so it can denote that. But that's the outside. The inside. The outside is called your vulva. So you need to understand that you have labia majora, which are your larger lips, labia minora, which are the smaller lips. Then you have openings. So you got the vaginal opening, which is the vagina, which blood comes out. Fingers can go in, penises can go in, all kinds of things can go in. Make sure they're safe. But then right here, you see this little flower part? That's called your urethra. That's the opening where urine comes out, so where you might pee. And then here you have the clitoris. And so this is just the outside of the clitoris. The clitoris kind of looks like a wishbone that extends down within two areas on the inner and the outer of the labia. So that is for the primary is pleasure and sensation. And for some people, it feels really, really good. For some people, it might feel a little weird and awkward. But we have to also use the right terms for the right body part. So if you go to the doctor and say, well, I have a bump in my vagina, on my vagina, they're going to be looking in the inside, not the outside, probably, because you need to know that this is the vulva. And I hope you'll like my little vulva puppet. I just happen to have it beside me. I saw a question in the chat that says, how do we talk about this with our parents when they maybe didn't have these conversations with their parents? That is such a good question, because all of this can be awkward, hard, and you just might not know. And I think the critical piece is, if you are a young person and you want to talk to your parents, say, parents, whomever, I really want to talk to you about this, and I don't expect you to have all the answers, but I'd like for us to learn about this together. That's from the young perspective. If you're a parent, you can say the reverse. I really want to talk to you about this. My parents may not have talked to me. Some of this stuff I learned on my own. Some of this I'm still finding out is not actually even correct, but I want to talk to you about it. And to be honest, if you're in a car, those are good opportunities to talk, like driving down, no one can escape. Or if something comes on the music, or on the radio, or some song is playing, or on TV, you can say, I want to talk to you a little bit about that, or what do you know about that? And it's not, neither one of you need to have all the answers. That's why you can use the resources and find out the answers together, and give each other a break and give each other some grace to, like, guess what? I don't know the answers, but maybe I can go online or talk to another a sex educator or person who is experienced with this and have conversations. The critical thing is, it's going to be awkward in the beginning for everybody, but once you start talking, and that's why if you start talking early on, I know my colleague is going to be up here later. I think I have it, Mr. Lex Brown James has a book that's called This Is Your Vulva. If you start talking about body parts, and then you start getting comfortable with it when they're like teeny weeny babies, the more you have those conversations, the more comfortable they actually become, and you don't stop having them. Hope that answered that question. And so now I want to talk a little bit before we wrap up to get to some questions about what is sex positivity. So you just learned about all these circles, how culture, your beliefs, and you can have your own thoughts about how that shows up for you. But being sex positive is basically, we have a saying that says, don't yuck my yum. Like, there might be some things I like to do, I'm thinking about doing, or I have done, that you're like, I don't think you should do that, or I would never do that. But it's okay because I like it. So sex positivity is that view, is that the only measure of a sexual act or practice or experience is the consent, meaning whatever you do has to be consensual. The pleasure, make sure it brings you joy, or you're okay with bringing somebody else pleasure. And the well-being of the people engaged in it or affected by it. That's why I said about pleasure. So sex positive is like whatever you want to do. Like, there's an old saying say, well, if you like it, I love it. And that's really a lie, because I probably don't love it or don't even know what it is or how to do it. It's basically saying, if you like it, get consent, be safe, and I hope you enjoy it. That's what a sex positive mindset is. And people who are sex positive are open to learning about sex, different aspects of sex, different aspects about themselves and behaviors. They are trying to understand their bodies, the bodies of their partners. They're thinking about not only the physical aspects of sex, but the emotional and the psychological aspects. Like, what is this doing to my mind? How do I feel about this? All of that. How can we be more intimate, even if it's not through physical intimacy? If they have questions, they'll ask. And so that question about parents, we want parents to be sex positive. Like, no matter what question you ask, I'm going to try to find the answer to it. And even though I have hopes and dreams and wishes for you, if what you want to do is different from that, I want you to make the best decision for yourself, to be informed, to have consent, and actually enjoy it. A sex positive person also understands the aspects of safe sex. So like people think if you say, well, I'm sex positive, that it's like, well, I'm down for whatever. And it's not that. It's basically saying, in theory, I'm down for whatever is safe, I'm down for whatever is consensual, and I'm down for whatever brings me pleasure. What I'm not down for is rape and incest, or people not having consent, people not taking care of their bodies, and people not being informed about the decisions they're making. So a sex positive person understands all of that aspect around that. And they understand that people might have had past experiences, like we were talking about sexual abuse or rape or incest, something like that. They understand that sometimes that can impact the way people show up in their intimate relationships, how they express themselves on the outside, that those things can have an influence on that, and that you respect that and you're able to work through that. Finally, a sex positive person will basically know that sex is a part of life. Listen, y'all, we are sexual beings from the time we're born until the time we die. Now, what we do in between that time is going to look different. How frequently we do some of the things is going to look different. How we even feel about our bodies. Like I just said, oh, and I lied to y'all. I told you I was 48. I forgot. I just had a birthday last week. So I'm 49. And the way my body shows up now is way different than when I was 29 and way different than when I was 19. And that's okay. And I'm learning this new body and I'm learning more about myself. And a sex positive person understands that things are going to change. There might be some awkwardness that you might have experienced at 19 that you're like, well, I'm experiencing a little bit of that now at 49, and that's okay. But we're not going to shame people. We don't judge people. And so a sex positive person makes sure that the person, again, has engaged in something that's pleasurable, consensual, and safe in whatever that safety means for that individual. And you also accept what people do. And I think I just covered that. As long as it's safe, we don't have judgment, and you can do whatever you want to do as long as it meets that criteria. So I want to thank y'all. Right at 10 minutes for questions. Please have some, or come on screen with me, come off mute, ask any question you want. I'll try to answer it. And if I don't, I can find out where to get some information from. Oh, absolutely. So thinking about how Black girls can get more comfortable with our bodies in the midst of adultification. Well, first, let's talk about adultification. And I can speak from that from like a professional and a personal experience. So adultification is basically the idea of placing adult values, expectations on Black and brown girls, especially. And like people in general, like boys get it too, but as it relates to girls, thinking about how our bodies are shaped and expectations. So for one personal / professional experience, as you're going through puberty and you're coming into your womanhood, your body's going to change. The fat distribution is going to change. Your hips are going to get wider. So all the things that happen with puberty, your breasts are going to develop. Sometimes people will be at a more accelerated rate, and some people will be, at more of a slower rate. All of it is normal, whatever the rate is for you. But what happens is people will see your body and expect you to be doing or assuming you're doing things or should be doing things or can be doing things with your body that you're not doing. So they're expecting that you might be sexually active. I'll give you the personal example of like when I was younger, there was a classmate of mine who started developing in her hips. Like she had a beautiful, I thought it was beautiful. Y'all might think it's a different type of shape. This is what I like and I found attractive. But what they considered like an hourglass shape, because her waist was getting like small, but her hips were spreading, as they would say, or getting wider than they were. And then she had like this gap in between the space where her thighs should have met, they weren't meeting anymore. And people were that they used to use that as a barometer, say, oh, well, you're having sex if you have that space. And that's not true. And that's adultification, like saying that she's sexually active or she, is promiscuous. But you can't control what happens to your body when you're going through puberty. And so she was subjected to this. And so, or expecting her, even adultification can happen where you might be big enough in size to carry your siblings, but you're not the parent. And so, you can help your mom or parents or whomever caregivers out, but you shouldn't be expected to be a full-on caregiver for your younger siblings. It's just not, it's not fair, even though sometimes it's out of necessity, but that's what adultification looks like. I hope that helped answer some of that question as well. Oh yeah, suggestions for books or resources. If you're looking at, I don't know if you're younger or you're working with younger kids, definitely Dr. Lex's book. This is my this is my eyes, this is my nose, this is my vulva. There aren't a lot. There's one called Girls Sex. Sorry, I'm looking over here because I don't know all the titles alone, but I will put in here. Let's see, Michelle Hope has a book. Dr. Lex James has a book. Our colleague, if you're a parent, Sex Positive Parenting, my friend Melissa has a book that's good. The book, The Body Is Not an Apology. And my book, I don't know. That felt hard. But Sonia Renee Taylor has another book, and the name is escaping me. She says The Body Is Not an apology, but she has another book for young women. Oh, y'all, I feel so bad. I need to start remembering these titles or having like a sticky note or something in here. Okay. Oh, the book, I found it. It's called Celebrate Your Body. That's an amazing one for young, for anybody, but if you're younger and the body is not an apology. And Pleasure Activism, for someone who might be older. Probably didn't spell that right. If you notice, even in my presentation, I try to find all images of Black and brown bodies. If you can buy materials, if you can use people at your agencies, I put in a website, nappy.co, unsplash.com. Find images, use them in your presentations. Be unapologetically brown, Black, and fabulous in your organizations. Counter the narrative. If there are magazines that you can get that have beautiful images of Black women, or even rip out the pages and make, put them, frame them and use them, do that. But these websites are also good for finding images of brown and Black women. So amazing. And what do you do if people don't reciprocate on the sexual intimacy you want? Do you move on with your life? I think you talk about the compromise, and if you need to move on, yeah, because there's certain things that you want, that you need, like skin hunger is one of the things I think about. Like, that means I'll call myself like touchy-feely. Like, I want to hug my girlfriends. I want to hug my partner. I want to just like, even in the midst of COVID, like, the struggle was real because we couldn't do that as much. And so if there are things that you're not getting your needs met, you have to communicate first. And then if there's some choices you have to make around that, you might, I don't want to just say move on with your life, but find all the ways to get that pleasure and to get that experience. And if that means finding someone else, you might have to. I mean, that sounds really bad, but I think that therapy also works for couples and partners to help them get to a common ground. And there's, I'm gonna do this before we got 1 minute. Sexuality has like this worksheet that you can use. And if you want to email me, you can. I have a copy if you can't find it on their website, but it's also good for people to talk about in their partnerships, what they like and what they don't like, or what they're willing to try. And you can fill it out and then have a conversation with your partner. It's pretty dope. Thank y'all so much.